I'm ready to roll, and I do have my green shoes on here. Don't know if you can see those. Loafers today. Back in the office, and today is a rivalry that is near and dear to my heart, often referred to as just the game, which is also a moniker that is shared by Yale and Harvard. But we're not going to talk about those Ivy League schools today. Today we are focused on Ohio State versus that team up north. I, as your professor, feel it's important for me to stay completely neutral here. So I'll do my best not to indicate to you which of these two programs I have an affinity for, that I may have worked for in the athletic department for a while, worked at some of the football games, but I'm going to try and put all of that aside here as we talk about this particular rivalry, and come at it from a neutral perspective. Your author describes this particular rivalry as the most consistently meaningful game for the longest span. What does that mean? Well, I think there's a couple meanings to it, but let's take a look. We will use Wikipedia here, have it up on my second monitor, and it gives us a nice table that shows this idea of meaningfulness over a long period of time. And you see here the number of national titles, bowl appearances, college football playoff appearances, Rose Bowl wins, appearances, Big Ten titles. Let's just focus on a couple of these stats in the table. Big Ten titles. You've got 42 for Michigan, 35 for Ohio State. That's 77 Big Ten championships. I'm going to guess the Big Ten has maybe been around for maybe 100 years. I'm not sure. Probably not too much more than that, if even 100 years. And you've got two teams out of a 10-team conference. Of course, now I think you've got 14 teams in the Big Ten, but you've got two of those teams that have won 77 titles. That should give you some indication about how meaningful this rivalry is. You've also got 10 Heisman trophies between the two schools, and you've got all-time winning percentages. Both of these programs, I believe, in the top 5 all-time in college football, winning more than 7 out of 10 games. Now, if we look at game results here, you're going to notice that Michigan got a big lead early on in this particular series, right? So they won, if we subtract out the 2 ties, it looks like they won 13 games in a row at the start of this rivalry, before Ohio State finally got a few wins, starting in 1919. And then you see Michigan goes on another long streak. Then we see Ohio State finally mixes in a few wins. Ohio State gets some more wins here. We start to get the ranking system in college football around this time, national rankings, and you see that lots of national rankings start appearing here, right? We'll scroll back up here, look down through here. Pretty mixed through the 60s, right, and into the 70s. Then you get into the late 80s, early or even into the 90s, and you see a pretty big string of Michigan wins here, right? This is the John Cooper era. Before many of you were born, but that was sort of my time as a junior high, high school, and then later college student. John Cooper gets fired because he can't beat Michigan, although he has one of the top football programs in the country, producing the most NFL players during that period, but he gets fired after going 2-10-1 against Michigan. So he plays them 13 times and loses 10 of the 13 during that period, and that's this period right here. And then you see Tressel comes in, and boy, is he successful against Michigan. You see all of these Ohio State wins. Of course, this one in white here. Those of you that are college football fans know Ohio State won that game, but then had to advocate the win because of use of ineligible players, which led to Tressel's departure. Michigan wins a game against interim coach Luke Fickell at the time, and then Urban Meyer shows up, and Urban Meyer is yet to lose to that team up north at the time of this particular recording. So that gives us just some historical background if you're not familiar with this particular rivalry. You could see how historic it is. You could see some of the ebb and flow between the two different teams, but you can get an idea of why it's so meaningful and for such a long span of time. Also, another quote from the chapter that I think is particularly important in describing the urgency or the factors behind this rivalry, that it's personalized a larger statewide rivalry. What is meant by that? Personalized a larger statewide rivalry. To me, it kind of sounds like we're talking about Toronto versus Montreal, right? Where you've got this rivalry between cities, in that case, that gets personalized through the sport of hockey. We might even say Louisville versus Kentucky, versus the University of Kentucky, is another instance where this quote could apply. Essentially, the author goes on to explain that what he means by that is two neighboring states competing for prominence in all aspects of intellectual, economic, and political life have created the conditions for a heated rivalry, right? So you've got this rivalry that's actually larger than just the University of Michigan versus Ohio State University or the Ohio State University. These states are competing for national prominence, for prominence in the Midwest. They're competing for industries. If you've ever driven up 75 from Ohio, Interstate 75, and into the state of Michigan, right before you get into the state of Michigan, you go through Toledo, Ohio, and there's a huge Jeep plant. If you're headed north, the Jeep plant is on your right. Actually, it's multiple buildings. Some buildings are on the left and some buildings are on the right. As you're going through Toledo, right before that state line, well, you might realize Jeep is a Chrysler brand. Chrysler is located in Auburn Hills, just outside of Detroit, and you better believe that those two states were fighting to get Chrysler to build that plant either in Michigan or in Ohio. Obviously, in that particular case, Ohio won that, and Toledo ended up getting the plant and the jobs, which means much more state tax revenue, right? Jobs for their residents. So that's just one example of what the author's talking about with this particular quote. Relative dominance comes up in this rivalry. We've seen this come up in a few other rivalries as well. But remember, when we looked at that list, we saw that Michigan was pretty dominant at the start of this rivalry, and just like we had when we talk about Yankees-Red Sox, where the Yankees were dominant, and the Yankees wouldn't recognize the Red Sox or admit that the Red Sox were a rival, that's how it was early on in this rivalry. Now we're talking almost 100 years ago that started this rivalry, but Michigan was very reluctant to admit that Ohio State was on the same level as them, which admitting that they were Michigan's rival would be admitting that they're on the same level. So relative dominance early on played a role. And then it still plays a role because what you've seen recently, and the reason that I took time to point that out, was that you'll get these spans within the rivalry of anywhere from 5, 6, 7 years where one team is dominant, and then the other team makes a change or maybe a few changes, as Michigan's gone through a few different coaches trying to find one that can beat Ohio State, recruit against Ohio State, and beat them on the field. And so you might get these short spans of relative dominance by one of the teams more recently. This rivalry is also important to understand when we think about rivalries in a certain region that have a national appeal or gain national attention. We've talked about El Clasico as a rivalry that has a regional appeal that gets international attention, right? Here is a rivalry in Ohio State versus Michigan that is very regional in nature, but yet certainly gets national attention. And a few factors can account for that. One being the two stadiums that were built over 100 years ago. They were the largest stadiums at the time. They were essentially cathedrals for football, right? And so if you think about the fact that when these stadiums were built, many of the fans didn't even have cars to drive to the stadium to get there. You know, they had to take some sort of public transportation, or they had to walk to the stadium. And the fact that they could still get 60, 70, 80, 90,000 people at these games, and of course now both stadiums over 100,000, is just amazing. Secondly, this idea of syndicated media is very important to understand as it relates to the national footprint of this rivalry. So not only were these programs, did they grow into two of the best programs in the country consistently, but syndicated media played a role in the game being important beyond just the Midwest region or the footprint of the Big Ten. When I say syndicated media, do you know what that means? You can think about it as certain TV shows go into syndication, and that means that they get produced independent of a particular channel or station, and then that independent producer will sell the show to stations all across the country, and it doesn't matter whether the station is a CBS station or an ABC station or Fox Sports or whatever. They'll sell it to that local station, which will play the game and create this sort of national footprint. So, to give an example, a lot of game shows or sitcoms that there's no longer new episodes for, they go into syndication. They get sold to essentially the highest bidder that's going to broadcast them all over the country. So let's say I'm watching, The Price is Right or something like that, right? I might be in Chicago, and The Price is Right might be on CBS. But then when I'm in Cincinnati, The Price is Right might be on the ABC affiliate, the local ABC affiliate. And if I fly to Kansas City, The Price is Right might be on the local NBC affiliate. That's because The Price is Right is a syndicated show. It's on whatever station wants to buy the rights to show that particular game show. So, getting back to sports, syndicated media is important here because syndicated media rose in the 1930s, and at that time we're talking about radio, right? And also newspaper. And local radio stations and newspaper stations started to pick up national stories, or they would print or broadcast national news through their local station, and they'd pay a fee to get that national news. Well, the first sports news, if you will, or games that were syndicated nationally was the Ohio State-Michigan game. It had a national appeal, and the Rose Bowl also played a big role in that. So the Rose Bowl was started on the West Coast to try and promote the West Coast teams. And the East Coast teams were getting all of the attention, and those in the Midwest, including Ohio State and Michigan. So the Pac-10 at the time comes up with this idea that, hey, we're going to start a bowl game, and we're going to invite the best team from the East, which included the Midwest, to come out and play our best team. And that will give us credibility nationally if we can invite those teams out and if we can be successful against those teams, which were at the time getting all the media attention. And that's how the Rose Bowl started. But the start of the Rose Bowl created attention on the West Coast for this Ohio State-Michigan game, because more often than not, that Ohio State-Michigan game determined who the Big Ten champion was that was going to then go on to the Rose Bowl and play that West Coast team. They move the game to the end of the season in the 1930s, which creates even more drama around it because it essentially becomes the Big Ten championship game before there was a Big Ten championship game. At Ohio State, the Pants Club also starts in the 1930s, specifically in 1935, which adds extra meaning to the rivalry on both sides. On the Ohio State side, it's that you want to get those gold pants charm. When I was at Ohio State, we were honoring one of the old Ohio State teams on the field, and so I got to meet several of those former players because I kind of escorted them onto the field at the right time out and make sure they got in the line and everything. And you'd be shocked at how many of those players had brought their gold pants, either 1, 2, 3, or up to 4 pairs, or with red shirting, you could essentially have 5 pairs of gold pants if you were lucky enough to be on a team that beat Michigan 5 times, or 4 times, or 3 times. So every time you beat Michigan, you get this gold pants charm, and you're considered a member of the pants club at Ohio State. Now that also intensifies the rivalry a little bit at Michigan, right? Because they're like, hey, our rival has this charm for when they beat us. It's that important to them. So that's another part of this rivalry, a unique part. Of course, with my history at Miami University, I couldn't let this chapter go by without pointing out the role of the Red Hawks, or at the time the Redskins, and the cradle of coaches. So Miami is known historically as the cradle of coaches because all of the famous coaches that have come out of there, specifically 2 coaches that played a huge role in this particular rivalry, Bo Schembechler and Woody Hayes. So Woody Hayes was the head football coach at Miami University. Bo Schembechler played for Woody Hayes at Miami. Bo graduated from Miami University. Woody goes on to coach Ohio State after Miami, and he hires Bo Schembechler as one of his assistant coaches, right? Well, during that early time of Woody Hayes, Woody was wildly successful against Michigan. So Michigan gets rid of their coach, and they actually hire Bo Schembechler from Ohio State to come to Michigan with a specific edict to try and beat Ohio State. And that starts what's known as the 10-year war between Bo Schembechler and Woody Hayes teams, where so many of those games were played with 2 top 5 or top 10 teams, meaning both Ohio State and that team up north were in the top 10 or even top 5 when they met in the 70s. Mostly that decade is in the 70s there. And essentially, this particular rivalry becomes a career maker or breaker for coaches. And I already mentioned some of them earlier when we were looking at the chart on Wikipedia about very successful coaches. I mentioned John Cooper, also on the Michigan side. A recent example would be Lloyd Carr, who was a very successful coach, but he couldn't beat Ohio State, and he gets fired. Same thing for John Cooper. Sponsoring the game. So because I worked at Ohio State, I had this unique sort of opportunity to show you an actual sponsorship proposal that is centered around this particular game. There we go. Let's look at it here. So this is a proposal that was made to Meijer. You see the Meijer logo down here. They didn't actually purchase it. You can see it's several years old, but it gives you some idea of how you might monetize these rivalries. So this just kind of gives a background. You can see the formatting is a little bit off, probably because I have a newer version of PowerPoint, but you get an idea here. We're going to skip through this. That's just some of the history of the rivalry. So what are the elements within the sponsorship that Meijer might get for sponsoring the Ohio State-Michigan game? Well, one is a sweepstakes set up where you have to go to Meijer stores or go to Meijer.com to enter the sweepstakes, and there'd be a grand prize winner. You can see what some of the details are that the grand prize winner gets, and then there's some second place prizes as well for people. So that's to try and drive traffic into the stores, right, at Meijer. Get Ohio State and Michigan fans to go into Meijer to enter the sweepstakes, and then obviously Meijer's hoping that they'll spend some money while they're there. Then there's different elements, what's inventory that Michigan throws into this sponsorship, and then we'll see the inventory elements that Ohio State is going to throw into the sponsorship for Meijer. So you see some game day radio spots throughout the season, 4 of those, some radio spots in the coaches show, some website banners, also some social media mentions of this promotion. This is the radio network where the radio show commercials would be broadcast in the case of Michigan. So you can see their network expands all around the state of Michigan, as you can see from that map. They have affiliates all over the state. Here's the Ohio State side inventory that they're contributing. Also, very similar elements that Meijer would get for Ohio State. This map is slightly different in that it doesn't have the radius of the station's reach, but you can see lots and lots of stations carry Ohio State games across the state of all across the state of Ohio. So very good coverage over that entire state. This is giving some more detail to or summarizing the different spots that would be included in this package should Meijer purchase it. You see again the commercials during the radio broadcast of games, as well as during the coaches' shows for each of these programs, as well as some social media elements. Now this is an interesting, you may have never seen a media schedule, so this provides you with a nice example of a media schedule. Along the bottom here we've got the dates during the season, all the dates, and you can see when each one of those spots is going to run, scheduled to run for the Michigan spots from Meijer, what week. And you see the coach's show here, football game broadcast here. Of course, this is an older sponsorship, like I mentioned before. So this is back when Brady Hoke was still the coach of Michigan. And then you see the banner ads run throughout the season on the Go Blue website, and then a couple social media mentions as well. So this scheduling, and here's the same thing for Ohio State, the scheduling allows Meijer to plan around this. You know, they can plan some of their own media mentions if they want to buy a separate radio package to broadcast during the morning drive time or something like that to promote the sweepstakes or to promote the sponsorship. They know when the spots are going to be running during the game broadcast, and if they wanted to, they could complement that by buying additional media to leverage the inventory within the sponsorship. Chad, my friend who allowed me to share the sponsorship with you, gave one condition, and that was that I didn't include the price, but it was pretty hefty. A six-figure commitment is what they were asking for from Meijer to get that, and at least at that time Meijer did not bite. So our last thing, why is this a rivalry? I don't have my chalkboard since I'm in the office, but let me write up a few things here. Certainly we have geography. Along with that geography, these two states being located so close to each other, I'm going to put on here cultural similarity, right? Both sort of Midwestern values, both very large state schools that are sort of the most prominent school in the state. Sorry if I'm offending any Michigan State fans out there. So you have some cultural similarity in terms of institutions. Michigan, extremely prestigious institution. Ohio State, their prestige also being raised more recently and becoming much more selective. Both grad schools are extremely prestigious institutions for graduate study and have been for a very long time. What else? We have parity, both historical and also recent, meaning although Ohio State's won a lot of games in a row, Michigan has sort of climbed back to prominence after some down years, and now it's pretty competitive again. And depending on when you're watching this, maybe Michigan will pick up a win or two here soon. Let's hope not. Next, we have relative dominance. Early in the rivalry, I'll put. And I think that still plays a little bit of role, even though that was a long time ago. There's still a little bit of hey, we're better than you, bent, I think, to the Michigan side of the rivalry. We also have here, oops, I guess that's our last point there. I think we can also put on here defining moments. We saw one on the earlier slide of Desmond Howard striking the Heisman pose after returning a punt against Michigan. That would be just one of many defining moments in this particular rivalry. We certainly have star power, both in terms of coaches, which we focused on in this segment, but also in players. We saw 10 Heisman Trophy winners between these two programs, so lots of star power. Let me think. Oh, frequency of play we can put in here. Of course, they only play once a year, but it's always the last game of the season, and it has been for about 80 years now. So that certainly plays a role here. And did I get everything? I think so. So we have quite a list here. Hopefully this helps if you didn't know the history of this rivalry or what contributes to it. Hopefully this helps you out. Brutus, say goodbye. That's it.